Hi, everybody. Hank Winchester here on Local 4 Plus. We appreciate you tuning in, watching the live stream here at clickondetroit.com. Obviously, the one thing that we are tracking that everybody is paying attention to right now is what's happening in Florida. Unfortunately, a devastating hurricane, Hurricane Milton, making its way towards land. Right now, we're giving you live pictures of St. Petersburg, Florida. You can see, obviously, heavy rain already there. The winds starting to whip. You can see the palm trees blowing there. We want to give you another live picture of South Florida too, the famous Sunshine Skyway Bridge that spans the entire mouth of Tampa Bay. That is closed right now. Just take a look at those pictures. I mean, it just looks eerie. If you've ever driven over that bridge, it's a large skyway bridge connecting the parts of Tampa Bay, the bay to the city, and right now completely empty as it has been shut down because of the concerns over the hurricane making its way towards Florida right now. Another image we want to show you right now, that's Alligator Alley, and you can also see a tornado funnel that had formed earlier in the day. Unclear whether there were any reports of damage. You can see that's there along Alligator Alley, and that's mainly an Everglade area there in Florida. That would be in Broward County, just north of Miami-Dade. So obviously the storm having a major impact all over the state of Florida. Unfortunately, we are expecting this to be a devastating weather event. Right now, the forecasters are saying that this is still a Category 4 storm as it approaches Florida. We expect that storm to make landfall sometime tonight, possibly after midnight Eastern time. It is something that is being tracked by weather forecasters all over the country, and obviously our team right here keeping a close eye on everything that's happening down in Florida. We know so many people here in Metro Detroit have loved ones, family members, or real estate that they also have had to evacuate and seek shelter. So earlier today, we had an opportunity to talk with our local forecaster, Ashley Barrissey, about the conditions, what we can expect, and what we really think is going to happen as this storm makes its way towards Florida. Here's Ashley. All right, everybody, we're now here in the Weather Center with meteorologist Ashley Barrissey, and already this Hurricane Milton, historic in its nature already.
Right, so 2 different points. This has become a Category 5 hurricane and will weaken before it makes landfall, but still will remain a major hurricane. Why it's so historic, at one point the sustained winds 180 miles per hour, making it the 3rd strongest hurricane coming out of the Atlantic Basin in history, tied with Rita, that was in 2005. And Allen back in 1980 had 190 miles per hour sustained winds, and so that was the strongest.
So what's the timeline right now? What can we expect with this storm?
So outer bands already impacting Florida with rain. Winds will continue to pick up. The waves are going to get higher, and it's just going to continue to worsen and deteriorate the conditions over the next several hours. The eye of the storm likely making landfall just after midnight, so in the early morning hours of Thursday. But really, it's going to be, the storm surge that's going to be the biggest risk.
Can we pull that one up? I know you have to step off camera.
We will,
second,
yeah.
But...
So, when it comes to the force of the winds, I mean, if it's a strong Cat 3 or a weak Cat 4, we're only talking about the difference of a couple mile per hour winds, right? So It's going to be destructive winds regardless. But the storm surge, and so the latest update coming out today from the National Hurricane Center has actually pushed down the strongest storm surge just south of St. Pete. So don't get me wrong, Tampa, St. Pete, they're going to see upward of 9-foot storm surge. So that still could overtake a 1-story building. But from Bradenton down past Inglewood, Florida, which this is a big retirement community here, and then you have Siesta Key, Longboat Key, people have property there, people vacation there. Now we're looking at upward of a 12-foot storm surge. And so these barrier islands, and then in the beachfront here from Bradenton through Sarasota will get the brunt of the surge, which is the highest wind heights. That's going to push farther inland with those strong winds, and you're going to see properties, homes underwater, Hank.
So this is the area that we're from south of Tampa area,
yes.
Metro Tampa, all the way down. This is the area where we're expected to see the largest storm surge. So more than 12 feet. So when we say that, how far in can we expect that height of water to push in? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's really going to depend on exactly where the eye hits. I don't know the exact miles.
It looks like it's been targeting
but
Sarasota pretty.
Absolutely. Bradenton, Sarasota is at least where it's kind of been wobbling towards, throughout the morning today and into the afternoon hours. But, I mean, that can go, it's going to go in a few miles, as you can see here. Now, the worst of it will be right along the coast there. I want to show you, though, as to why storm surge is so, just so catastrophic and important. So let's go ahead and get to that portion of this. When it comes to the waves, so what happens is, you get high tide and sometimes that trickles up on the beach. But when you have predicted 10 to 15 feet, so we'll say 12 feet, for instance, with this major hurricane, you can see how these waves are crashing and overtaking the one-story buildings, going up a couple stories with apartment complexes. So this is going to wipe out properties along the beach closer to the eye of the storm. And, it's not just one wave that comes through. This is a longer duration event. Those waves will increase over hours. We're talking 36 to 48 hours that this will continuously deteriorate. And then eventually, you'll see this hurricane push out into the Atlantic. It's still going to have hurricane force winds on the Atlantic side of it.
On the other side of Florida.
Yes.
So once it hits this area, Sarasota, as we saw before, around midnight tonight, still until Friday, they're going to be dealing with the effects of that because it will last 36 hours later.
The effects of the storm as far as just rain and winds, of course, but what's
the brunt of it will be that first what?
But what just is like so heartbreaking is these properties that are wiped out. It's going to take years for them to build back. I just keep thinking of Katrina.
Yeah.
And it's very sobering to see what's going to happen.
We were talking before, too, about we've seen different correspondence in the Tampa area showing all the debris. Now, that was debris from
Helene.
From Helene. But now what's the concern with all of that debris? Because they haven't been able to get to all of it.
So, of course, there's a lot of debris on the curbside that they just have nowhere to put that.
Yeah.
But the biggest part of it, scientifically speaking, is that the ground is already so saturated because they picked up so much rain. Mm-hmm. And you saw what happened in North Carolina with Helene, that, the infrastructure just cannot handle that amount of water in a short amount of time. And so the water just has nowhere to go. So when we're talking about forecasted rainfall, upward of 8 inches, National Hurricane Center even has localized pockets of maybe 18 inches, over a foot. Then you're pairing that with over 12 feet storm surge.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, you can't even fathom what's going to happen to the Gulf Coast of Florida.
Yeah, I mean, literally all coming together is the perfect storm, whether it's the winds itself or the storm surge, or it's devastating. Yeah. That's why you're staying on it. We appreciate the update. We'll have more at clickondetroit.com as the storm makes its way towards Florida. Thank you, Ashley. Kim Adams and the team, they're already hard at work. They're going to have the latest regarding the models, what we can expect starting live at 4 o'clock. The big story here is that, as Ashley put it so clearly, it's going to be devastating. Not just the winds, but obviously the storm surge. And think about that, 15 feet, what that could do as it makes its way towards land and as it pushes its way across the state of Florida. One thing that people here in Detroit often do in times like this is they want to say, what can I do to help? We have reached out to the Red Cross. We've been working with the Salvation Army, giving you the information and the links if you want to make a charitable donation, if you want to donate blood. All of that right now is at clickondetroit.com. But yesterday, the Red Cross came out and they talked about what was happening, not only in Florida already, but in North Carolina. They talked about the teams of people here from Metro Detroit on the road, driving towards the storm as they get ready for the storm to hit, and then dealing with the aftermath. Take a listen to what the Red Cross had to say about this event.
We know that people are generous and want to do everything that they can to help during a disaster. Our priority is to provide shelter and to support those who are affected. Financial donations are the quickest way and the best way to help those who are most in need. You can do so by, again, visiting redcross.org. An average of 90 cents of every dollar is invested in providing care and comfort for those in need. Your gift is a commitment to helping people in need, and every single donation matters. Secondly, the American Red Cross is working to restock critically needed blood products after the cancellation of many blood drives across the Southeast. This has caused more than 2,500 blood donations to go uncollected. We are encouraging the people of Michigan and others outside of the affected areas to make an appointment today at redcrossblood.org.
because you can get it
So
wet.
the Red Cross has a whole team of people obviously working on this, many already on the ground in Florida, but as you heard, some still here in Detroit working to coordinate the efforts. They are asking for blood donations, also any sort of financial donations right now. The Red Cross is a verified and trusted organization that for years and years and years has worked to help people when they deal with tragedies like this one. We're going to be talking about hurricane-related scams in a moment, but right now I want to bring in our expert, Local 4 Dr. Frank McGeorge. Thanks, McGee, for being here. So we wanted to talk to you about this because I think the images of people seeing that hospital right there on the water in Tampa, number one, alarming because of its location, but also the setup that they've got, how they built this kind of temporary wall.
Yeah, the aqua fence.
The aqua fence. Yeah, right. And I know you have a colleague, you have a friend who works there. What are you hearing about the conditions in the hospital right now and what they're prepared for?
Well, they're preparing obviously for the potential for storm surge, and they're hoping that the aqua fence holds. But what we've discovered, I think, is that no matter how much you basically try to...
There's that fence you mentioned, the aqua fence.
No matter how much you try to predict what's going to happen and prepare for things, things go wrong. I mean, we saw that with Katrina, for example. Katrina, of course, that was ages ago, 20-something years ago, or 20-ish years ago. The levees failed in New Orleans, and that's why Charity Hospital was overcome. And more recently, we saw in North Carolina, a dam broke, and that caused the Baxter factory where IV fluids are made to flood. So there are a lot of unexpected things that happen, and hopefully the aqua fence holds, but if the aqua fence doesn't hold, they are actually prepared. They're better prepared than, for example, Charity Hospital was for Katrina.
But so I was just reading, I know a lot of the water supply to residents in Sarasota, Venice, and South has been turned off. I'm assuming parts of Tampa also.
Right.
So the hospital says we can run completely separate. We don't need anything. So it's a combination of their own water supply, their generators, and then just obviously, making sure that if they're able to function 24/7. I mean, if emergencies arise.
Well, keep in mind, hospitals basically try to, I think, function as almost an independent little mini city. We have all of the resources available, ideally, to sustain ourselves independently for a period of time. Now, it depends on where you're located, how long that's going to be. So obviously they're preparing for many, many days at this point because they have previous hurricane experience or they have planners that have thought about this. Now, we had just talked about during the power...
the blackout,
right. We were caught unprepared at that point because we really didn't have a lot of extra backup generator capacity in many hospital systems. And so, there was a certain point where we were like, oh, okay, now what are we going to do? And so we had to essentially ration electricity a little bit. But I'm pretty sure that they're going to be heavily prepared as long as their systems don't fail. I mean, that's the main thing. You're counting on the fact that you have water, that you have power, that you have fuel, that you have food. If any of that fails, then you have a serious problem.
So this is really what I want to pick your brain about then. So does the hospital say, like, we're going to have this many heart surgeons and this many experts in this, and you're all locked in here, and then you're going to work on shifts, like kind of like how it was when you were a resident. You're all just locked in that building, like how I would enjoy watching Grey's Anatomy, right? and when tragedy struck Seattle Grace, they had their teams in place. But I mean, really, is that how they do it? I mean, they kind of run internal personnel to...
Well, so, you've got to keep in mind, of course, that during a mass disaster like this, if a physician, nurse, first responder type was at home, they probably wouldn't have the ability to get to work.
Right,
I mean,
so
the
they have
streets
to
are
keep
flooded.
them in the hospital. Yeah,
exactly. So you have to basically prepare by having crew in the hospital. Now, you prepare as much as you can, but there's a certain point where, you just have unexpected things happen. But yes, they have people that are ready and willing to work in the hospital and ready and willing to work in shifts. And there is basically, staging so that the physicians, nurses, techs, all the support staff are able to continue their job to the best of their ability. But I was going to bring up something else that people may not think about. First responders, whether you're working in a hospital, whether you're working in a fire department, police department, whatever, first responders have to be at their job and have to put aside all of their personal and family needs. And we actually prepare for that ahead of time, knowing that we may be called upon
for extended
periods of time, right?
Yeah.
Without the ability to care for our, families, essentially.
Or even communicate with them.
Exactly.
We've seen shortages going into this, though, just because of, and so what are we dealing with right now? I guess there's issues regarding IV bags even, or what?
So the IV fluid issue, that stems from Helene. Helene put down enough rain in North Carolina that a dam broke. When that dam broke, it flooded the Baxter Edwards manufacturing facility, which is where 60% of IV fluids are made in the United States. Wow. 1.5 million bags per day. So that's an enormous resource that's been taken offline for an undetermined period of time. It could actually be months before they come back online. So there is going to be a substantial IV fluid shortage for a long time that the entire United
country
States
doesn't matter what part of the country.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Your friend that's down there, have you spoken to him recently about conditions, or I guess for you guys,
not
it's just
as
like
of today.
Yeah,
right.
it's I always just think that that's the thing though, as emergency responders and people who deal with this is kind of what you're called to do, right? I mean, this is like you understand the assignment and you get it.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, you don't go into the job without having some idea of what could happen and what you could be called on. But, the hardest part for us is so this is something where there is a predictability. In other words, you can stage people at the hospital, you can prepare the hospital. There are natural disasters that occur where you don't have that staging time. I mean, I think of, for example, when a tornado, this was many years ago, when a tornado hit Detroit, I actually was working scheduled to work the next morning, and I had to drive in, regardless of the fact that the lodge was flooded and there were trees down on every side street.
Yeah.
I had to make my way from home to the hospital because I was the emergency physician that had to be at the hospital that morning.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. And you do your best to get there regardless of the circumstance. And again, I think all emergency workers, again, regardless, first responder types, have that in mind and have preparations. I mean, in a way, you're kind of all, you become a little bit of a doomsday prepper in that sense that you have to be prepared to show up at work regardless of the circumstance.
No matter what's happening. Yeah. And we've seen that play out, whether it's been a natural disaster or unfortunately, like something like 9/11, where like the hospitals downtown in New York.
Well, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And during 9/11, for example, I remember being at the hospital and we just waited at the hospital all day because we didn't know whether they were going to bring casualties from New York to as far as Detroit.
Yeah.
And so we just waited. And of course, nobody came.
Yeah. So with this type of weather event, then you would expect that they're already in the hospital, the staff, they've already reported.
Yeah.
Probably around the time when the airports started closing, which I think was yesterday, some of them in South Florida. But they could be, the expectation is they could be there for at least 4 or 5 days. I mean, it's going to take at least 36 hours for the storm to pass over Tampa once it makes land.
Right.
And then it makes its way, over towards Jacksonville and then, out to sea.
Well, exactly. And so you have to prepare for the fact that there are patients already there that you still have to take care of. There are going to be newly injured potentially that come in that you now have to add to the pool. There are also, depending on the magnitude of the disaster, there could be community members coming to the hospital because they know it's potentially a safe refuge.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of other factors that go into the planning, I should say, of a mass casualty like this.
But then the hospital, if you were on the inside of it, probably just seems kind of business as normal. I mean, I'm assuming in some way.
I think there's a certain amount of, essentially rationing and planning as far as where people are going to need to be.
Yeah.
But to a certain extent, everybody knows where they're supposed to be. I mean, these incidents are planned and practiced. I mean, we don't go into them blind. I mean, we all have mass casualty or disaster plans in place, and we do actually go through them periodically to know who the incident commander is, to know what the reporting structure is in a disaster circumstance, because it does change significantly compared to business as usual.
I would just be nervous if I was the patient who had to have surgery and I know it's the backup generator.
Well, so yeah.
I would be very nervous because I would think if the generator fails, then what?
Well, to be clear, there aren't going to be any elective surgeries.
No
elective,
but surgeries have to continue.
Yes. Right. Well, and that's true. And, again, you prepare to the best of your ability, but, there are times I know in certain disasters where there are power failures, for example, during a surgery, people get out flashlights, people get out headlights, people do what they have to do to make it work at the point of time.
No, I know you do. I just, I want to be the patient that wakes up afterwards and everything's just fine.
Yeah, right. Well,
so it's unbelievable the work that they're doing. Every first responder and even the people those who have to come in after this storm. We've already seen the DTE crews that are down there. The people doing this unbelievable work to get people back online, to get people's lives back to normal. It is an unbelievable, tremendous event, and so many hands are involved.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, I think people need to recognize the sacrifice involved for all the people that are staying behind to man their stations.
Yeah.
That's true. That is a big deal because it means that they have to put their families aside or basically have taken care of their families in advance.
Yeah, it's a huge commitment and a lot of work. And so we appreciate your insight. Thank you very much. We know you're going to be providing more insight as the days and hopefully only a few days.
Hopefully everything will go as planned and nothing unexpected will occur.
Okay. All right. Dr. McGeorge, thank you for your time.
No
we
worries.
appreciate it. We'll see. Are you on today at 5 and 6?
I am.
Okay. All right. We'll see you on the we'll see you on the TV.
See you on the TV, yeah.
We also mentioned the scams that are taking place. Unfortunately, this is what happens all the time. Whenever we have a significant event like this, this one being a hurricane, unfortunately, scammers use it as an opportunity to make their move, to take advantage of you, to rip you off financially. We do not want that to happen. That's why we got some expert advice from Dewey Steffen. He's the CEO of Great Lakes Wealth in Livonia. We caught up with Dewey to get his insight on where you should donate and how you can avoid those scammers. So unfortunately, we're dealing with hurricane season. We've already seen the destruction. If people want to make a donation, what should they be doing?
Yeah, they should definitely do their research. You can always count on the Red Cross or the Salvation Army, but really do some research. You can go to Charity Navigator, other places, and really determine what you want to give and where you want to give it.
How concerning is it, though? Because whenever you have big events like this one, there are scammers and people trying to move in to take advantage of people, too.
Yeah, there are so many wonderful organizations and so many wonderful people that want to help, including the people that are watching this and thinking about it, but there's so many scammers out there as well. You really have to do your research and make sure your money's going to where you want it to go.
How concerning is it when you see messages on Facebook or people, doing crowdfunding or sourcing on a website like Facebook?
Yeah, sometimes they're safe and sometimes they're legit for sure, but again, everything else, just do your homework. Make sure it is what it appears to be, and better safe than sorry.
And with these charitable organizations, if you are looking to make some sort of a contribution, there is a benefit in some way. I mean, you are helping people, but for you yourself, it's important to keep track of those receipts and everything too.
Yeah, absolutely. There are tax deductions if you have an itemized tax return. So talk to your tax preparer, your financial professional, if that's something that you want to talk about, certainly at the end of the year or into next year when you do your taxes. Maybe it's not the primary reason you help, but it's certainly a benefit.
All right, that was Dewey Steffen, CEO of Great Lakes Wealth, providing us some information and some insight regarding scams and also the places that you should be donating right now. As we've mentioned, 3 good ones right off the top: the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, the United Way. We have more information for you right now at clickondetroit.com. Kim and the weather team, they are tracking this. They're going to have the latest updates for you live here at 4 o'clock. As always, we appreciate your time. Thank you for being here with Help Me Hank on Local 4 Plus. If you need to get in touch with me or any of the members of the Help Me Hank team, you can easily do it right there. You can head to clickondetroit.com to the help desk. You can also call our tip line at 313-588-0425. We will continue to track Hurricane Milton as it makes its way towards Florida. Again, landfall expected just after midnight. Thank you for your time today, and keep it here on Local 4 and clickondetroit.com for more information.